Hi everyone, my name is Chris. This is Simply Classic. Thanks for joining me. Today we're going to do a full tutorial on an oldie but a goodie, and that is the Lola by Swoon. So many of you know this bag already. The Lola is a very classic shape. This is one that I made a little bit earlier, and I followed the pattern exactly as it said. So if you do that, the only hardware you need is zippers, and that's it. There's no hardware to attach the straps. There's no other hardware inside the bag if you follow the instructions exactly. We are going to make this bag just like this. I'm going to show you exactly how to attach these straps with no hardware. We're going to put the zipper in, and on the inside we're going to make just a few changes. Let me show you how I did this bag. So I used this really fun print from Swoon. I don't know if you can kind of see that. But the pattern calls for a slip pocket only on one side. Okay? And I did that, obviously. I added a little bit of detail here with the actual accent on there and then some rivets. But I also added a zipper pocket on the other side. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted to pull the bag through the bottom and then close it up through the zipper pocket. I'm going to show you how to do all that. So the other thing I added was, of course, a key fob. And then to get these really nice corners on the outside here, see how they're not angled in at all? There's a natural dome shape to this bag, but there's no funny squared off corners here. I also cut two zipper tabs. So let's go over all of those pieces. Okay, the great thing about the Lola is that there's really not that many pieces to it. You have a front and a back, which are exactly the same, okay? And you have a bottom. And basically, besides that and the handles, that's really all you need if you don't want to put a exterior zipper pocket in. So there's not a ton of pieces to it. Now on this, instead of using foam, I actually used Decoville Light on the front and the back, and I used Decoville Heavy on the bottom. The pattern calls for foam, which works great. I just prefer Decoville. The other thing I did was I cut a zipper overlay in my contrast, so that's going to be black. I cut two pieces for my handles. Now we're going to do this together, but what I did was I took two pieces that were big enough to fit the handle pattern piece. Okay, so you see how that will fit on there. I took two and I glued them wrong sides together. And that's what these two pieces right here represent. So we will cut that. I'll show you how I trace it, cut it out, sew it, everything in just a little bit. Then I also cut two zipper tabs. And these two zipper tabs are not part of the pattern, and they measure about 1.5 by 1.5. So you want to cut two of those. And then because I'm putting an interior zipper pocket in, I cut a second zipper overlay. Exactly the same as the first, just use the piece in the pattern. I also cut a accent piece for my interior slip pocket, and then I have a key fob piece, which I don't have here right now, but I'm also going to have. Now for my lining, I cut a front and a back, just like the pattern says. So it's the same as your main pieces, your main front and back pieces, okay? And then a bottom, again, same thing. I cut one large piece from my slip pocket. So instead of cutting two pieces, sewing them together, I just decided I was going to cut one long piece. I'm going to fold it in half and sew it that way. So you're going to cut this the width of what the pattern says, and then I cut it 14 inches long. And because I'm doing an interior zipper pocket, I actually cut 2 sets or 4 pieces of zipper pocket. We're going to use one for the exterior zipper pocket, and we're going to use one for the interior zipper pocket. Okay? Those are all the pieces. So just to let you know what I'm using here, this burnt orange snakeskin is really gorgeous. It is from Boltz Bagz. And then the black is the Faux suede. I think it's from Indo Love Kreations. And then this is just a cotton. I decided to do something fun today. It's a cotton, and it might be hard to see, but it's actually gray, and it's got little white dots on it. So it's a little polka dot pattern. So those are all my pieces. Let's get this show on the road. Okay, the first thing I want to do is take my pattern piece, and as you see on this pattern piece, I went ahead and cut out the zipper pocket opening and also cut out the little spots where I'm going to place my handles. So I'm going to put that on the actual piece here and trace that so that I know exactly where everything goes. So I'm just using a Tandy silver marking pen and just drawing this right on. Okay, so this is kind of a shiny material. I think you can see that. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other front piece, but I'm not going to mark where the zipper pocket is going because you're only going to have one zipper pocket on this. I guess you could have 2, but I'm just going to put 1. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark my handle placement, and that way it is there when I am ready for it. Okay, the second thing I'm going to do is mark my handles. So here are my 2 handle pieces that I've glued together, wrong sides together. I'm going to put the actual handle pattern piece on top and trace them. And if you've made my Ali B bag, you know this is very similar to how we do the shoulder strap. Okay, so there's one traced. See that? We are going to do this a little bit different than the Ali B though. We're actually going to cut it first and then sew it. There's a reason for that, and I'll show that to you in just a minute. Now I experimented with these handles and found that this method I'm going to show you right here, the order, is actually what gave me the best outcome on this other bag. Okay, so now that these are traced, I'm going to get I have an English point punch. I've tried this and I cannot cut these exactly right so all 4 of them match. I've tried it many times and I just don't have the ability to do it. Not sure why, but I don't. So I'm going to use my punch and I'm going to punch all 4 edges or all 4 points of this before I do anything else. Okay, this is what the English point looks like. You can get this from any leather shop. Tandy, Springfield Leather, District Leather, I mean any of them. The only thing I would recommend on this is Amazon has some of these, but the quality is not very good. I ordered a set and the first time I used it, this handle bent. So save your money and buy quality in this case because you're hitting it, and of course when you do that it has a tendency it can bend. So right where I put the point, right where I drew this point, I'm going to put the very point of this punch right there. Now the punch itself is going to be a little bit smaller in width than the handle, but she purposely made the handle pattern piece bigger because she wants you to cut these 2 pieces together to get a nice even edge. So once this is on here, I'm just going to whack it. and then I get a nice clean point. So I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. Make sure it went all the way through, and it did. So again, a nice clean point. So go ahead and do the other one just the same way. Okay, so now I have these pieces with these edges cut. I'm going to go to my table and I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to place one end of the ruler on this side of the cut and one end of the ruler on this side of the cut, and I'm going to do a nice straight cut down all of the edges. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 edges. I'm going to do that nice straight cut, and then we'll sew them. Okay, so now I have these beautiful handles, and this faux suede has got a black back. So I'll tell you what, I don't even think I need to edge coat this. I mean, it is gorgeous. It's beautiful. So let's go ahead and sew these up. Now, I'm going to give you a tip before I do. Another thing that I've had problems with in the past is that when I come to sew down this and turn and come back up, sometimes I don't get the end stitch right in the point, right in the corner. It's off a little bit and it looks funny. So the way I remedy this is I take, and you can either measure this or you can eyeball it. I'm just going to eyeball it, and I'm just going to go ahead and put a dot right where I want to turn. And I got to get this in the light, hold on. So right in the corner, or right in the point, I should say, about 1/8 of an inch up, there is a tiny little dot right there. And so I'm going to sew down to that dot. I'm going to make sure my needle goes in the dot, and I'm going to turn and I'm going to come back up. And you can use this for any kind of corner or point or anything like that that you do. And it really gives you a much better looking product. Okay, so I have all my dots. So we're going to go ahead and sew this. I'm going to use my edge guide. I'm going to start out here. Now, because this is black, I feel like I can back stitch a little bit and it'll be okay. But I'm going to back stitch on the way back instead of, if you're going to go over your same stitches, you don't have to back stitch when you start and back stitch when you end, because now you have like quadruple the stitches. You just need to back stitch one time. Now when I go around these curves, I'm going to be very careful, and I'm just going to take it one stitch at a time. And then I'm going to make sure I stop right in that dot. Once you make your dot, trust your dot. And if you need to adjust just slightly to make sure it's in there, that's good. So now my needle's down in my dot, and I'm just going to turn it and go ahead and start up the other side. Make sure I'm right in that dot. I'm going to turn and come back the other side. So when I get down here, I'm going to pull my thread through to the back. And then I'm going to come back over these same stitches and backstitch. I only did 2 or 3 back stitches. You don't need to do that many. And I had used this black thread for this other project, and I already ran out of bobbin. So let me go ahead and replace it. Okay, so our handles are done. Let's go ahead and start on the main bag part. So I'm going to take my zipper overlay and I'm going to put some double-sided tape on it. Okay, the bag piece that is going to be the front, which has the zipper overlay, or the zipper cut out here. Okay, so I'm just going to use my craft knife. And I want to tell you, I am experimenting with this new craft knife. It's a Zoid. And if I like it, I'm going to start carrying them on my website. It's got this really nice rubber grip here. And I can get replacement blades for it, so stay tuned for that. I'll let you know if I start carrying these. And this doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to cut out this box roughly in the shape that I drew. If you want to use a ruler here, you can. Didn't press quite hard enough there. There we go. And I do have Decoville Light on here, so it's making it just a little more thick. It's not quite get through the Decoville. There we go. Okay. So just a rough cut here. And then we're going to center this right on top. So to make sure it's centered, I actually turned mine around. And then I also measured from the bottom and the top to make sure it was straight and centered. And you know, these measurements, as long as they're the same for you, you are going to be good to go. And this, since this is a dome, be careful on the top because it's not going to be the same in the middle as it is on both sides. I just want to look at it and make sure it looks straight. And I'm going to put a little dot in the corners here as well, because on this one I'm making several turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 turns to sew this on. So I just want to make sure that I'm getting right in the corner for every one. So I know exactly where to turn. Okay, you see those white dots there? That's what I'm doing. All right, so we're going to sew along the outside, and this time I'm not going to back stitch. I'm just going to pull my threads through and tie them off. So I'm going to start in one of my dots. I'm going to make sure I end in my dot. So what that might mean is pulling your last stitch a little bit longer or making it just a tad shorter to get it in the dot. And then on these little short ends, I counted 3 stitches. So I'm going to make sure each of my little short diagonal ends have 3 stitches in them. And pull my threads through to the back. I'm going to make sure I end in exactly the same hole I started in. And then let's go ahead and tie these off. Put a little bit of double-sided tape on there to hold it down, make sure it doesn't come apart. Perfect. Looks fabulous. Okay, so now you want to take your pocket pieces, 2 of your pocket pieces, and you want to take your zipper, one of your zippers. Okay, you're going to want to take your zipper and put it wrong side of the zipper to the right side of the pocket. Go ahead and clip it in place. And you're going to go ahead and sew this on. Then you're going to flip it, and you're going to flip the seam allowance down like this. Okay? So the zipper is nice and flat, and you're going to top stitch. And you're going to put the other side on and do exactly the same thing. Now, because this is thin cotton, this machine doesn't like it. It's too thin for it. So I'm going to do this sewing on my domestic machine. I'm going to go ahead and do both my zipper pockets at the same time. And then the other thing I'm going to do is to take my slip pocket for the interior. I'm going to fold it in half, right sides together, and I'm going to sew down each of these open sides. So I'm going to sew down here, and keep the top open on this one, okay? So just so, keep the top open. We'll flip that. So your 2 zippers onto your zipper pockets, and then we'll start putting all this together. Okay, I have my zipper pockets done, and I put my zipper pull on. So you see the right side of the zipper with the wrong side of the pockets, and the wrong side of the zipper with the right side of the pockets. So we're going to put one of these aside. I also sewed up my slip pocket. I'm going to put that aside for just a minute. And I'm going to put some double-sided tape on one of these zippers. This is the one we're going to install on this front piece. All right, we're going to make sure this is centered. Okay, once it's centered, make sure that your pocket's open and go ahead and sew along the inside of this box. If you want to put your dots in there, you can. Just like we did on the outside piece. And I'm going to pull my threads through. So I'm going to not backstitch. Pulling my threads through here. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure I end in the same stitch I started in. Go ahead and tie these off. And because we're going to be on the inside of a pocket, I'm going to burn this instead of putting double-sided tape, because we certainly don't want double-sided tape on the inside of our pocket. Okay, when you fold this down, you're going to have some extra, and that's okay. It looks like I have extra on both pieces because I don't want it to extend past the bottom of this bag. So I'm going to, without spilling on my clips, just cut this off. And then we're going to sew this pocket closed all the way around all the sides, because this is not the pocket we're going to use to close the bag. Pull off this double-sided tape here. tell that's going to be a problem. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this back. I got a lot extra here, so I'm just going to get close to the bag, and I'm going to back stitch over my teeth, make sure everything stays closed. When I get to the bottom, I'm just going to turn and flip this back. And then turn again. I'm actually going to back up a little bit. And then come on up. And just trim this down a little bit. And we have a beautiful zipper pocket. Okay, the next part we're going to do is sew on our handles. Now, in the instructions, she says you're going to sew in the same stitches you sewed when you sewed this together, these two handle pieces together. And when I read that, I thought, oh, that's not gonna happen. I mean, I can try, but I doubt very seriously it'll work, but it really worked out well. So I'm gonna show you how I did it. I'm just going to start by putting a piece of double-sided tape on here. I don't want it to be too big, so that it holds it while I sew. Decide which side you want to be the front. I can see my double-sided tape. I put it too far down. Just cut those little ends off. Okay, put one aside, and you're going to line these up right in those markings you made. They are slightly angled. Make sure you don't twist your handle. Okay, I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to mark up where I want it. What you need to do on this is you're going to stitch across, and then you're going to stitch in your same stitches going down and around. So I want to make sure that my across stitches are the same for all 4 handle pieces. So I measured up 1 1/4 inches from this tip, the very, very tip right here. 1 1/4 inches up. And I drew my line. So 1 1/4. So I'm going to start by stitching across, and I want to stitch between these 2 stitch rows that I did. I'm going to stitch across, and then when I get to this row, I'm going to very slowly, and you're going to see how I'm going to literally hand crank all of these stitches to make sure I get in the exact same hole. Okay? No back stitching. I'm just going to tie off. So I'm going to make sure I start at my stitch line and come across. Okay, I'm going to pull my light down because I need to see a little bit, so I hope it doesn't blind you all. Okay, so now I went into the hole exactly across where the stitch line is, okay? And now I'm just going to very carefully, I'm literally just going to hand crank every single stitch. And I can still see my dot, which if I'm going in the same stitches, should not be a problem. I saw someone ask the question on one of the sites, or one of the groups, Facebook groups, is it bad to hand crank your machine? And the answer is no. As long as you always hand crank towards you, you'll be fine. Don't ever go backwards. If you do, you're going to end up with a big knot underneath your machine, and you might end up having some problems getting it back to where it needs to be, right? So just make sure that you're always going towards you and you will be fine. And I want to pull my thread through here. I can. There we go. Well, there we go. Okay, so now I'm going to finish this out. And I'm going to make sure I end in the same hole I started. Tie these off, and I'm going to show this to you up close. I am going to put a little double-sided tape to hold this down, make sure this knot doesn't come out. Alright, let me see if I can get this off. Okay, I'm going to show this to you. I still have a little bit of pen on there, but you'll get the idea. And you cannot tell where and I know it's black, but I'm telling you, you cannot tell where the stitches, I mean, they're just right on top of each other. It worked out perfect. So the idea is to hand crank, go slow, and you'll be fine. Bag making's not a race. I mean, there's some things that we can do quickly, and that's okay. And I know that sometimes we're doing this as, you know, to sell, and time is money, but quality is very valuable. And there's a difference between handmade and homemade. And I want to make sure all of my bags are handmade. They're not perfect, but I want to make sure they're handmade. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and finish all 4 of these straps in the same manner. Make sure I'm getting in the same holes and hand cranking. All right, and the handles are done. They really look great. I'm excited about them. So don't be intimidated to try that. Just go slow. You will be fine. You will be just fine. Okay, so now take your slip pocket piece and we're going to turn it. And I've shown this before. You want to take the edge and fold it. And when I say the edge, you want to fold it right along your stitching, your seam allowance, and you're going to hold it with your thumb and your finger, and you're going to poke it out. And I'm going to use my double ball point turner here to just kind of do the final little poke. And I love, love, love this tool, and I'm carrying it on my website now. So if you're interested in getting one, check it out. They're fantastic. You get these great corners. Okay, so I'm going to take and I'm going to press this before I do anything else with it because I want it to be nice and flat. So I'm going to take it over the iron and do that. Okay, my pocket is nice and pressed, and I'm just going to stitch across the top to close it. Just using about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that I have 2 layers of cotton and some woven fuse, this machine does okay with it. All right, I'm going to take my accent piece that I cut, and this is, again, not part of the pattern, but it's the way I always do my pockets, and I like the little added touch that it gives. And this piece is a little bit longer than what I need. It's just a scrap piece, so I'm not going to put the tape all the way to the end. Now when I put my pocket on, I want to put it just shy of the center because you need some room for the take up when it folds. So if you want to mark this, you can. I usually just eyeball it, but I'm going to mark it for y'all so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to draw a line down the center. And then I'm going to take the bottom, backing off. And when I place my pocket on, I'm going to place it just beneath that line. I don't know that you can see that line. Let me make the line darker. Okay, see if you can see that. There's a white line on there, and this is just below that white line. So when I fold this over, it should match up exactly right. I'm going to top stitch this, and I am going to back stitch. And then I'm just going to cut off my edges here, make it even. You're going to take one of your lining pieces and we're going to fold this, mark centers, and then when we place this pocket on here, you want to place it about a 1/2 inch from the bottom. I don't want it to get caught up in my seam allowance down here at the bottom because it's just going to get thick. So I'm going to So it's about a 1/2 inch, and I want to make sure it's centered. So let me just make sure. And actually, I'm probably going to do it about 5/8 from the bottom, because usually you take, on this bag, I'm going to take my seam allowance a little bit larger on my lining to make sure it fits well. Okay, I'm going to put a couple pins. Everybody say hi to Hootie. And now I'm going to sew, I am going to make a pen pocket actually. I like pen pockets. I always like to have a pen with me. And this is really wide for a cell phone. So I'm going to come over about 1.5 inches, about 2 inches. Come over about 2 inches and draw a line so that I can get a good pen pocket in here. And I'm using my Sew Line Air Erase pen. These are awesome. Okay, so I'm going to stitch down, cross, up, down, cross, up. And when I stitch up and back down, I always go over one stitch and then come out. Ouch. Then come back down the other side. And that way I'm not trying to stitch in the same stitches. And it also gives me a little hole up here at the top, like a little box that I can put my rivet in, because I like to put rivets in these stress areas to make sure they stay. Okay, so here's a good look at the back so you can kind of see how that stitching pattern runs. And right up here, you see I went over one, that's where I'm going to put my rivet, right in that little square. You don't want to rivet over stitches because your stitches will come out. When you poke the hole, it will actually cut your stitches. So I'm going to go right in the middle here. And again, this is not in a pattern, this is just something I do with all my bags. I like to give them a little something extra. Whenever I put rivets in a case like this, I always put some decorative heavy in the back here because I don't want the rivet to pull through. So they don't have to be big pieces. You can just put smaller pieces and just put it over the rivet. before you put the cap on. All right, so I'll set those rivets. That's what our slip pocket looks like. So let's move on to our other side. We'll go ahead and mark our centers again. And now this part is not in the pattern either, but we're adding a zipper pocket, and it's going to make it a little bit neater, I think, in the bottom of the bag when we turn it. So take that second overlay piece that you cut, and we're going to put that here. And I'm going to measure down, because this is not the pattern, from the very top. So again, this top has a curve, right? So from this top edge, the very top edge, I'm going to measure down 2 inches. And I'm going to put this overlay right on top, right at that 2-inch mark. So we're going to do exactly the same thing with this pocket as we do with the outside pocket. We're going to stitch around the outside. We'll put our zipper on, or our zipper pocket in, and then we're going to stitch around the inside. Okay, we're going to cut out the center here, and this doesn't have to be pretty, remember, you're not going to see this. So just make sure that you don't cut your overlay. Put your zipper tip underneath your zipper overlay as you go to the edges. And then we're just going to turn this over and cut it out. And your main goal here is you're just trying to get it outside of the opening. You just don't want to see any of the edges through the opening. Okay, so back and front. So now take your other zipper pocket. We're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to center it in there, and we're going to sew. Now, we are not going to sew the bottom closed on this one, because this is how we're going to aid ourselves in closing the bottom of the bag. Zipper pocket complete. I'm going to do my key fob real quick. Again, not in the pattern. I just know that I had a key fob. Let's say I never had a key fob, and then I had a key fob one time in a Dooney and Burke bag I bought. And after that, I said I will never be without a key fob again. So I put a key fob in every bag. So I'm just going to put double-sided tape down that one long end, and then I'm going to just make sure that these meet up in the middle here. I cut this piece 1 1/4 inches by about 8 inches. And I'm going to sew 1/4 inch from the edge. And then I'm going to trim it to make sure my ends are nice and even. All right, I'm going to go to my table. I'm just going to trim this edge down to 1/8 inch. Okay, if you want a key fob, you're going to have a 1/2 inch swivel clip. I'm just going to put that on, fold this over, and just put a rivet in there. Okay. So I'm going to go set these rivets, and then we're going to put this back together. Okay, when you use this method with zipper tabs, you want to go ahead and put your zipper pull on. And then you're going to take one of these zipper tabs and you're going to place it right side down on your zipper. We're going to sew this on at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now flip this up and make sure your seam allowance is going up towards the zipper tab. And then you're just going to wrap the tab around that seam allowance. Okay? And now I'm going to top stitch. I'm just going to cut off the excess here. And then I'm going to even up the zipper tabs with the zipper. Okay, so now we have one tab on. You want to take your, I'm always going to use my front with the zipper on it first because I want to make sure my zippers go in the same direction, open in the same direction and close in the same direction. I'm going to measure 3/4 inch because I want to make sure I have nice neat corners. So 3/4 inch from the edge of the bag. So right here where this point is, I'm going to measure 3/4 inch up. I'm just going to make myself a little mark. I'm going to do this on both sides. And before I do anything else, I'm going to just clip this zipper on because I want to see exactly how long it needs to be before I put my other zipper tab on. Because once I put this zipper tab on, now this zipper is essentially locked in, and I want it to match. I want it to be exactly the length between these two dots. Now you could measure this with a ruler, but I just assume clip the zipper on. So I'm not going to be super particular about this because I'm going to turn around and take it right off. But I do want to make sure that I have the right length here. Okay, so I see right where my mark is, and that is the exact length I want to cut the zipper. Not shorter, not longer, right on my mark. So I'm just going to put a little clip in my zipper tape. Take this off. And then right where that clip is, I'm going to cut my zipper off. Now I'm going to repeat the process, or these steps. I'm going to clip this on, and I'm going to stitch it at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to wrap it around and top stitch. You might notice I flip my zipper around to stitch this on. I feel like it's easier, it's flatter, I guess if that's fair. Then if I try to stitch it this way, I have the zipper teeth bump to go over, where this way it seems to, my foot seems to go over a little better. So if you have problems with that, try flipping your zipper over and see if that helps. Okay, so seam allowance going up towards the tab, and then just wrap that tab right around it. And then we're just going to cut this edge off. Even up the tabs with the zipper tape. And now we have a closed zipper. So making sure your zipper is going in the same direction, you want to go ahead and clip this on. Now, I'm going to use some double-sided tape here. I like using double-sided tape with zippers. It kind of acts as a third hand for me. I'm still, because this is slightly curved, I'm still going to clip, but I'm also going to use the tape. I'm going to be doubly sure this does not move. So I'm just going to tape right between my marks. Now, if you choose to do your handles this way, you're going to have your handles to contend with here. Just FYI. I think that's why a lot of people use hardware when it comes to this bag, is one, they don't want to have to try to stitch in their same stitches, and they don't want to have to deal with the handles as they're sewing this zipper on. Okay, so I'm going to pull this off, and I'm going to make sure that my zipper starts and stops right in between those tabs. Now, don't pull your zipper as you lay this down. Just lay it down flat, because if you pull, you're going to get a wavy zipper. We don't want any wavy zippers. And I'm ending right there at my mark. Perfect. So now I'm going to take my lining piece and I'm going to take the piece with the slip pocket because I really don't want a zipper pocket against a zipper pocket. And I'm going to put some double-sided tape on this. And then we're going to clip these together and sew them. And I'm just kind of guesstimating on this one where the 3/4 inch mark is. It's not as important because my zipper's already on. Okay, so on this one, as I clip, as I put this down, I'm going to clip. So I'm going to make sure these sides look pretty good. And again, don't pull, just kind of let it sit down on where it wants to here. Okay, so now you're going to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you are going to sew end to end. Don't sew just between the zippers. Sew from one end all the way around to the other end. And I'm going to back stitch here. My zipper pull is really chunky, so it's a little hard to move here underneath this zip or this foot between that and the handles. Now, sometimes your little zipper tab wants to stick out a little bit. Just kind of push it in there. Make sure it's lined up with the edge. Now, to get this to lay nice, I am going to put some clips in here. I know I'm clipping through my zipper tape, but I'm okay with that. It's gonna be fine. I've not ever had a problem with somebody telling me the zipper tape came apart because I made little clips like this in it. So you're clipping close to your stitches, just not through them. And then we're going to fold this back. I like to go hit this lining with an iron very carefully. Make sure I don't. Actually, this is doing pretty good. I'll probably wait and do that at the end. Okay, so let's do the same thing. We're going to mark this 3/4 of an inch from each side. Make ourselves a little mark. We'll put some of our double-sided tape on there, in between the marks. Now, if y'all are not familiar, this is the first time you're watching a video and you like it, please subscribe. But also I want to mention that I use this bag to get what we call the Brahmin Pinch. So if you're familiar with the Duxbury, I think that's how you say it, Duxbury Brahmin bag, it has that kind of pinch at the top. And this is the pattern I use for it. So I'm going to link that video down below so that you can go back and watch that and refresh your memory on it. I do size it up when I do that. You don't have to, but that Brahmin bag is a bigger bag than this one, but it's the same shape. Okay, so again, now you have two handles to contend with here as you put these right sides together, but it's okay. Just take it slow and you'll be able to get it on there. So in between my marks, make sure I see where my mark is. I'm going to lay this down and I'm going to put a few clips in here as well, just because my handles are wanting to pull it apart just a little bit. So you may have to get a little rough with it, make it do what you want it to do, make it go where you want it to go. Sometimes kind of standing it up helps. And my zipper lands right there at that 3/4 of an inch mark, so that's good. So I'm going to put more tape on this lining, second lining piece. We're going to put right sides together. So when I say that, I mean your right sides of your lining are now matching up, and the right sides of your main bag are now matching up. So here's the right side of this lining. I'm going to put this right on top and then match this up. Okay, so we're going to sew this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance as well. So pull your zipper out of the way, zipper pull. Let's see if I can get it out. Okay, I can't do this, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lift this up, I'm going to pull it out, go ahead and zip it, and then just stitch over these stitches a little bit. Let's make it like a back stitch and keep going. Don't be afraid to do that if you need to. let's make our little snips here. All right, let's look at it here. I'm going to put the right side. And because it has this dome shape, it naturally just like pops out. I don't know how to explain it. It's really an amazing design. And I also want to say, if you try this bag and it doesn't come out good the first time, try it again. Because the first time I made this bag, a while ago, it did not come out well at all. At all. And I I wasn't too happy with it, but I made it the second time and the third time, and every single time I made it, it just got better and better. So, okay. No top stitching in this bag. So now we want to take our bottom piece. Now, I'm sure you noticed you have these little triangle cutouts in your bags, and that's essentially where this is going to fold to create your side seam. So I'm going to, just to make sure everything works out okay here and matches up, I'm going to mark my centers on my bottom. And I'm going to mark the center of each of these main pieces. You might want to do this in the beginning. I should have done this in the beginning. I'm terrible about remembering it until I need it, and then I think, oh yeah, mark my centers. Okay, it doesn't matter which side you put this on first. Go ahead and line it up, clip it on. And what's going to happen is the bottom of the bag is going to extend beyond your triangles. So see, from the front here, you can't see those triangles. But in the back, you can see where the back extends past them. Okay, that's okay. What you're going to do is, on the bag itself, you can kind of see where I marked my 1/2 inch seam allowances on here before I put my decaville on, because I want to make sure my decaville was within the seam allowance. So I was going to give you a better bag if you do not sew on your decaville when you sew these seams together. So I know exactly where the point of the decaville is a 1/4 inch. Excuse me, is a 1/2 inch. So you're going to start and stop a 1/2 inch from this side. So you're going to start and stop right at the point of your decaville. You're going to sew, and you're going to stop over here at the other point. Don't sew past there. Just from like in between decaville to decaville. So make sure all your other parts of your bag are out of the way when you do this. One other thing I want to mention, if you want feet, purse feet, you need to probably go ahead and put those on now, or before you sew the seam anyway. The pattern doesn't call for it, but you could certainly add it if you wanted to. So now we're going to take our bag and we're just going to bring it up like this, and we're going to match the other side. And we're going to do the same thing. we're going to sew from Decoville to Decoville. So I'm going to flip this around so my bottom's on the top so I can see exactly where I need to start and stop. Okay, before we box these corners, let's get the bottom of the lining on. So grab your lining piece, mark your centers. And I'm going to put it on the side with my slip pocket first. And since I don't have Decoville on this bottom piece, I'm going to go ahead and mark my 1/2 inch on this bottom, because I don't want to sew past that. So I'm just going to come in 1/2 inch, make a line, and 1/2 inch, make a line. And I'm going to take a slightly larger seam allowance here, about 5/8. Okay, we're going to again pull this up and clip this side. Now, this is different than the pattern. The pattern wants you to, well, the pattern wants you to leave an opening here. You're going to pull the bag through the opening, and then you're just going to close up this seam once you turn the bag. I'm going to close up the seam through the pocket so that it lays nice and flat in the back of the bag and you don't see where it was closed. So I'm going to mark my 1/2 inch. And I want to leave as big of an opening here as possible. So I'm going to sew only about 1 inch. I'm not going to sew very much. And I'm going to make sure I back stitch really good, because as we turn the bag through this opening right here, we don't want these stitches to pop. So again, I'm going to do about a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to start at the 1/2 inch mark, back stitch. It's going to go a little bit, and I'm going to back stitch again. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, so now we have a nice big opening here to turn our bag. So from here we want to box our corners. So let's do the, or we want to sew the side seams first, and then we're going to box the corners. So make sure that your zipper pull is kind of in the middle of the bag. You don't want it close to one end or the other, and you want it, I'll kind of put it between my handles. I want my side, my right sides to be together, of course, and my linings to be together. So I'm going to poke this kind of dome piece out. So it's poked out on this side, and it's going to be poked out. Can't see it really. Here it is. It's going to be poked out on this side as well. So it's facing out on both both occasions. I'm just going to pull the bottom towards me, and I'm going to clip these sides together. Now, you want to make sure that your side seams here match up, okay? Where your lining and your side seams, when all that comes together, you want to make sure your face, like that seam with the face and the lining, are match up perfectly. So I'm going to clip that first, and then I'm going to clip the rest of the bag here. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Make sure that those seams are matching up really good. And then clip the rest. And then look again and make sure it's even. Okay, that looks good. So now I know it's not going to move because my needle is in there. So I'm just going to do a back stitch. All right, I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to do the same thing with this other side. Okay, a couple of things I want to tell you, and you can see it right here. The side seam, the side stitch, did not make it all the way up to the top, and it also did not really intersect this stitch where we sewed the zipper on. That's okay to have a little bit right there. It's going to be hard to get all the way up, and you don't really need it. When you turn it, you're never going to know. So I'm fine with that. If you can't get all the way up, don't try to do it. You're going to end up probably doing something to yourself with the bag because you have to really muscle it. So now you're just going to open up these seams here. So you want to open up your side seam and clip the bottoms together. And we're going to box these corners. Now, you don't have to clip anything because your triangles are now coming in handy. Okay, see where you had the triangle, it's automatically splitting right there. So it works out great. Now in this case, you do want to make sure that when you stitch across this seam, you are going to pick up and end right where your side seams ended. If you need to turn and take a couple extra stitches on your side seam to make sure they match in either direction, do that. Because you don't want any holes in the bottom of your bag. You don't want to be able to look in your bag and see sunlight on the other side. And a lot of times I end up having to do that. So you've got a lot of bag here. So manhandle a little bit, make sure you get it to do what you want it to do. And when you stitch this side seam, or this box corner I should say, you are probably going to have to kind of push the bag down some to get it to, Okay, push it down. And then just go ahead and make sure you start where your seam is and sew all the way across. So I'm going to make sure I pick up right there. And this box corner has a little bit of a curve to it. So you're kind of almost sewing in a semicircle or in a little half circle. Okay, so all my stitches matched up there. You can kind of pop this back up. And now I'm going to do the same thing with this other corner. I'm just going to kind of take the bag and smush it down. Okay, so this seam, my side seam here, I think I could have taken like one more stitch. So I'm actually going to start this way, and I'm going to sew a couple more stitches, and then I'm going to turn and do this side seam here. Let's see if I can move the camera so you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to start this way. I'm going to take a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to turn it and come across. So going to kind of go right over the stitches I had already done. And then I'm going to turn the bag and just kind of fold this edge over, lay it flat. And I'm a few stitches short on this end as well, so I'm just going to turn the bag and come back down this seam, this side seam, catching my other stitches. Okay, we'll just pop it back up. And now we're going to stitch the side lining. So we're going to match up our edges. Now when you do this side seam for the lining, it's going to be the same deal. You're not going to be able to get all the way up in the corner, and that's okay. Alright, I don't want to forget my key fob. Let me see which side it's going to go in. It's going to go in the other side. Okay. So in this case, I'm actually going to start from the bottom and go up and get as close as I can to the top, because I know I can get closer by sewing into the top than sewing away from the top. And I am going to do this at a slightly larger seam allowance. And then as I get closer to the top, I'm going to reduce my seam allowance. Okay, so see, I'm getting to the top. I'm not going to be able to stitch all the way up there. I'm just going to get as close as I can and do a little back stitch. And you see there, it didn't go all the way up to the top. And that's okay. I'm going to do a repeat over here. key fob. And now we're going to box these corners. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Open up our seam allowance. Okay, and I'm going to sew from end to end, picking up and then stopping where I left off. Flip this over. Turn and come down my side just a little bit. From here we want to trim seam allowances. I'm going to go to the iron and I'm going to press the side seam allowance open from my lining. And here, let me trim this first. So I'm just going to trim the bottom here. Don't trim the opening area. You want to keep that open, or to keep that long so that you can sew it easily. We'll trim it after we sew it. Okay, so I'm going to go to the iron and I'm just going to press these seams open, and then we'll talk about opening the seam of our bag. Okay, I pressed these open. We want to trim the bottom of the bag now. The seam allowance is there. And then I want to do what I can to keep these seam allowances open on the sides. Because otherwise you'll have like a weird bulky side, because this will stick out and I want to push everything out. So I've tried double-sided tape, I've tried double-sided tape and duct tape, I've tried duct tape, I've tried all kinds of stuff. Honestly, the best thing that works for me is leather glue. I'm not going to do that right now. But what I am going to do is to put some double-sided tape on here, and then I'm going to put some masking, or not masking tape, some duct tape on top of it. And hopefully the combination will hold it down pretty good. And once it's turned, it usually stays okay. It's just kind of during that process, sometimes it doesn't want to cooperate. It actually seems to be staying pretty good, so I think I'm just going to skip the masking tape. All right, I'm going to turn the bag. Okay, so once I make sure, you're going to first of all see that these corners just pop out nicely. I mean, just naturally. You don't really have to do much. Just make sure your seams are open and they'll be fantastic. So once I see the lining fits well and everything looks good, I'm going to open up the zipper on the inside and pull the pocket out. Okay, so there's the pocket. Then I'm going to reach inside this pocket and I'm going to grab the bottom of the lining and pull it out the pocket. I'm going to clip it and we're going to sew it together. And by doing it this way, you don't have that weird kind of bump on the bottom of your bag from where you sewed your lining together. Now you could hand stitch the lining and you wouldn't have that. But I know when it comes to hand stitching, a lot of you are turned off, which I get. Not my favorite thing either. Okay, so I'm going to stitch this closed. So before I push this in, I am going to trim back this seam allowance. Okay, and I'm going to push that back in, make sure it all looks good. And it fits beautifully. So I'm just going to take the pocket and I'm going to fold it at about a 1/2 inch. So when you stitch this, that weird bump that you would have gotten on the bottom of your bag, you're going to get inside your pocket, but it's inside your pocket, so it's not as big of a deal, right? And I have not figured out a way to not get that weird bump. It just, I say weird bump, it's just bulky. So if anybody has any suggestions, feel free to leave it below or email me directly. And burn these threads. They got a little funky on me. Okay, so let's push this back in. And I like to really poke these corners down in there. So let's see. Okay, zip that up, make sure it all looks good. And there we have a Lola. So this is just, again, this is like such a classic bag. The inside fits wonderfully. So we have our pocket, our zipper pocket there, and then we have our slip pocket here. Everything looks great. These are great fall colors too, both of these. So I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. A classic, the Lola. You gotta make them. They're awesome. So until next time, happy sewing!